What's up, bitches?
Let's talk about crime.
What's up, bitches?
Hello.
I don't have anything extra special to talk about other than the fact that, can you believe we're on the 28th episode? That's
No.
not bad. That's not bad considering that's like we're over 6 months worth basically.
Maybe at our 100th episode, we should do like a special
We
episode.
should do, well, for,
like somebody that is famous. Because we've talked about how we would never do famous people.
well, on Fatal Blend, for our 52nd episode, which is your 1 year, we're doing a special. We're doing a sneak peek. It's a family of serial killers is what we're doing. So
The Manson family?
It's not the Manson family. It's not. But it is a family of serial killers. And so I haven't even told the Fatal Blend followers that. So if you're a Fatal Blend listener, surprise. But I am not going to tell you who it is. I'm not going to say anything else because this week we'll be releasing our 51st episode. So our 52nd episode on Fatal Blend is next week, which is crazy. That's been a year. So we're doing something special for our year. We're also changing the intro for Fatal Blend for our 1 year. So we have those things going on. Yeah, it's going to be a woo. But for us,
we're not changing our intro.
No, I like our intro. No, I like our intro.
Sorry, friend.
No, I like our intro. Dad wants it to be he wants the music to be a little different. And then I told him that I kind of want to cut out like all this.
He's just jealous of ours.
Well, I think as you listen to ours, because our intro is fairly quick and then we get into our personal talking, yeah. I think he wants to kind of go that way too.
Jealous.
Because we're trendsetters. Anyways.
Okay, I don't know about that, but
I'm a trendsetter. What are you talking about? I'm absolutely a trendsetter. I have been my entire life.
Okay.
Bitch, I was literally 15 years old hiding my inner Disney and Nickelodeon Looney Tune love because it was not cool. And then I was like, fuck it. And look at all the Disney adults now, bitch. And they're all under
bitch, that
my
wasn't
age.
From you.
Yeah, it was because they're all younger than me. They're like, oh, look, if she can do it, so can we.
Okay.
Anyways. So do you want to just get into it?
Yeah, might as well.
So we are talking about the Wanstrath Murders. So this happened in 1979, and we are talking about Diana, John, and Kevin Wanstrath. They were murdered in Houston, Texas, and multiple people eventually are held responsible for their murder. Multiple people. There is not a lot of background to give because honestly, again, this is kind of like last week, which I feel like these are kind of the way our podcasts are going to start turning out because of how I'm researching crimes. I'm not always going to have background. It's just it's not possible because a lot of the times when I'm researching, all of the information is not about the background of the people. It's about the literal crime. And
not only that, but the older the crime, the harder it is to find some of that background information.
Well, and this one, there's a lot to this story without any background, like a lot that goes on. So I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. I'm not talking about the background. But I will give you just a little bit of information about the Wanstrath family because then you kind of have an idea who these people were. So John is 35 and he's a successful oceanographer, and his wife Diana is 36 and she's literally like a just beautiful, sweet socialite woman who just is just there, happy, has friends and family and, loves her life. And then they had been married for 10 years when they were murdered. And they also had a 14-month-old son named Kevin, who was their adopted son.
Sorry, I had to.
Now, by all accounts, John was a super good person. He was described as delightful, intelligent, and it was also said that Diana loved him very much. So they literally had a very good marriage. They were very happy. They had their son. Their son was their pride and joy, and they were just living their life. Now, the detectives who investigated said that no one had anything bad to say about the family, which made it really hard for them to understand why this family was dead. Not one single person they talked to throughout the neighborhood, throughout their life, through coworkers, had anything bad to say about any of them at all. That's that. Okay, so that's that. So here's what happens. On July 6th, 1979, police are called to the home of John and Diana Wanstrath. Now, their housekeeper had shown up went to the door, knocked on the door. Nobody answered. So she kind of like looks around the house, peeks in the window, and she actually sees what looks to be John and Diana completely unresponsive. John's sitting in a chair. Diana's on the floor. So she immediately calls the cops. If he was just in the chair, maybe it wouldn't have been such a red flag. But seeing her lying on the floor was like, okay, something is definitely off. Well, the cops show up. They enter the home, and it is discovered that Diana, John, and their 14-month-old son, Kevin, were all dead. Each had been shot in the head. Diana was found on the floor in front of the fireplace. John was slumped in his, like, it's like a recliner. It wasn't really a recliner. It was like a sitting chair, like a comfier sitting chair. So he is slumped over in the chair. And actually the detective said, had you not seen the blood, you would have thought he was sleeping. Like he was just there, right? And then Kevin was found shot in the head in his crib, and he was surrounded by his stuffed animals. And that, the detective also said, was that like he actually like he had to pause while he was talking, because I watched a documentary on this, and he said it's hard to get the image out of your head, because he's like, it just looks like this little boy sleeping, but he's dead. Like it's the most awful thing you could ever see. It was immediately noticed that there was no forced entry in the home, so they automatically assumed it was not a robbery. The medical examiner then obviously takes the bodies and does what the medical examiner does, and their job is to look through the body for clues and come up with the cause of death. So the medical examiner comes up with the conclusion that this was a murder-suicide.
Okay.
Which, if you don't know the whole story, could make sense. No forced entry. You know, you've got a guy in a chair that's slumped over, a baby and a wife. They're all in different places. They've all been shot in the head. Okay. Now, he says that Diana killed her husband and her son and then killed herself. So his assumption is she killed the husband, then went upstairs, killed the son, then went downstairs, killed herself, and that's why she's on the floor. However, there was never a gun found in the home. Never. Now, investigator Johnny Bonds did not buy it. He was the main investigator, and he was like, that does not make any sense. Where was the gun? Where was the ammo? If she killed herself, why do we not have a gun? Now, as a matter of fact, he actually does not stop investigating, even though the medical examiner says, hey, this is a murder-suicide. He's like, no, it's not. No, it's not, because it doesn't make sense. And he actually ends up becoming extremely disliked by most of the people who were involved in this case, because he wouldn't let it go. People kept saying, like, you're literally going to lose your career over this, because the medical examiner has already said it's a murder-suicide, case closed. And then he continued to ask questions. He would have meetings like with the medical examiner, like, I don't understand how you could say that it's a murder-suicide. There was no gun found. There's literally nothing that would point to a murder-suicide in this case. So it even gets to the point that Johnny Bonds, because he goes to his boss and he's like, I'm telling you, it's a murder. It's a homicide. It's not murder-suicide. Can I please keep investigating? He throws a fit. Well, the medical examiner and Johnny Bonds' office, I don't know what their ranks are, captain, whatever. They're kind of tight little buddies. And so what he does is his captain is like, nope, you're not going to keep investigating it. Also, by the way, we're moving you to internal affairs. Goodbye. Kicks him out of like the department he's in, puts him into internal affairs, and takes him away from the case. However, Johnny Bonds is like, nope, I'm not stopping. Like, I'm going to continue. This is wrong. And he said part of his motivation was that little boy. He's like, that little boy is dead because of somebody, and you're trying to say the mother killed her own son? When you talk to everybody in the neighborhood and anybody who knew her, and they were like, there's literally no way. This lady loved her family. And then they were saying that, like, oh, well, at one point they said, well, maybe they were having marital problems. People were like, no. Like, on her calendar at her house was a date where she was planning an anniversary party for her and her husband. There was nothing to allude to the fact that she would have been depressed, upset, hated her family enough to kill them both, right? It just, nothing makes sense. Part of the reason why I think that the medical examiner thought that this was suicide was because Diana's mother, Gertrude Duff Smith Zabolio, she was 57 years old when she committed suicide, and that was 4 years earlier than this.
Okay, so running in the family. And she had actually been found with like pantyhose around her neck in her home, right? Nice. I'm glad you thought that too, because I thought that. I was like, who the fuck kills themselves with their... Okay. That's not... Okay. Diane... Also, pantyhose are that strong? God damn.
Back in the day, them shits didn't rip.
Holy shit.
Diana was also
the only one who had a contact injury, meaning the gun was held to her head. So these are things that made the medical examiner go, okay, well, number one, well, and also backtrack real quick. The medical examiner brought in which I had never heard of this until I found this out. And even Johnny Bonds was like, I had never heard of such a fucking thing. He had brought in a different like medical examiner that they called him like a psychology medical examiner, meaning that he was supposed to basically analyze the psychology of the person after death, which I don't understand how that is
like that's
done.
just fake.
Right. That's kind of what I felt like. But I think that's where her mother committed suicide. That's where that kind of information.
Like maybe looking at the background.
Looking into her background, looking into her past, looking to see, did she have mental health issues? Was there a problem? Could she have, whatever. And so that was part of this. Those are the two main things that were like, yeah, it's murder suicide. So of course Johnny Bonds is like, well, where's the fucking gun? First of all, there's no ammo in the house, which means they didn't even own a damn gun. So where's the gun? The medical examiner's explanation for this. He had two possible explanations. First of all, he said, well, I'm saving the more ridiculous one for the second one because holy shit. First, he's like, well, I mean, she could have had an unknown person come into the house and take the gun and then bury it in the backyard or just like take it and hide it to save face for Diana so she doesn't look like an awful person. Probably not. But I could see, okay, maybe I could buy that, especially because there was a weird fucking rumor that went around after she passed away that she was secretly a lesbian and that her lesbian lover took her. And she was, I don't know why she would have killed herself over this, but that she didn't want to be in her marriage anymore and that her lover came in and took out the stuff so that nobody knew that she was a secret lesbian, which bull fucking shit. Anyways.
Okay.
The second explanation was, maybe she rigged up a rubber band elastic type thing
You're fucking
to the
joking.
top to the fireplace, and when she killed herself, it flung the gun out of the chimney.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Serious? Out the chimney it goes. It's because she was that. Wow, she had a rubber band elastic like slingshot shit that when she died, it was like take the gun and out the like perfect through the fucking chimney and into like no man's land. Are you kidding me?
Wow.
Okay, so those are his explanations for the no gun. Now again, Johnny Bonds is like, you're absolutely out of your fucking mind if you think those are the reasons why. And he's like, no, this does not make sense. This was a homicide. So pretty much anyone who knew the family were extremely upset that the murder-suicide, that was the ruling of the death. Because again, she had shown no signs of wanting to end her life. She was planning that party. She was continuing to live her life without any suspicions over a woman who would supposedly commit suicide and take her family with her. Mm-hmm. Like there was no signs of anything. It literally took 2 years of constant investigations by Johnny Bonds before anything came to fruition with this case. Because again, he didn't give up. Now, if he didn't continue, this would have been a murder-suicide always. So Johnny Bonds would not give up to the fact that he is actually now known as the cop who wouldn't quit. There was a book written about him, and the book is called The Cop Who Wouldn't Quit because he did not fucking give up, which bravo, Johnny Bonds. And I was so happy to watch the documentary because the documentary is with Johnny Bonds. So you get firsthand knowledge. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this stuff came from the documentary that I watched because it's straight out of his mouth. This is what he, who is the one who did this, is saying. So I'm taking his word to the heart.
Right.
Because why? Yeah. So anyway, so one of the things that Bonds had really started to investigate was the fact that the Wanstraths were actually worth $1 million. And so obviously money is always a motive in any murder. If they have money, that could be a motive. So he's like, I'm going to dig into the $1 million. And then he actually took a close look at all the family and friends that would have benefited from the family dying. So he's looking into all of them. And he ends up talking to Markham Duff Smith. Now, Markham Duff Smith is Diana's adoptive brother. So he was adopted and raised in her family. Now, he does have an alibi of being with his wife at the time of the murders. However, and it is a corroborated alibi. His alibi is solid. They can prove that he was with his wife. So he did not kill them. But he does not and is not able to pass a lie detector test. Now, in the world of law, lie detector tests are not any reason to arrest somebody. It's not any reason to charge them because they're not admissible in court. However, it is enough for Johnny Bonds to go, okay, something's missing. I'm missing something here. I don't know what it is, but I'm missing something. So he continues to dig because he's like, something's not right. Well, as he digs, he finds out that Diana and Markham both had received $100,000 off their mother's suicide. So she had left them money. And then it was discovered that the Wanstraths had actually recently changed their will, and their will was to leave their son all of their he was going to inherit all of their property. But if Kevin was no longer alive, it would go to Markham. And so he's like, okay, hold on. That's weird. Then an even bigger bomb drops, literally a few weeks after this murder. There is an anonymous phone call that goes into like a news reporter. And it says, I don't know about the Wanstraths, but Markham Duff Smith had his mother killed in 1975. And it was set up by a man who the caller identified as a coin collector. And so they were like, okay, what the fuck? Hold on. Wait, she didn't kill herself? What are we talking about here? And then they start digging into Markham's background and find out that Markham's best friend is Walt Waldhauser, and he happens to be a coin collector. So now they're like, hold on, there's more to this story.
I knew the fucking pantyhose ripped. Bastards.
Now, during the investigation of Duff Smith, it is also found out that he and Waldhauser left their wives and moved into a mansion together. So now it's kind of like, well, let's find out what's going on. So Johnny Bonds continues. Like, he's like, okay, I'm starting to find these little tiny leads, and I'm still missing the big picture. I mean, I'm missing the links here, but something is not right. So he actually ends up talking to Walt Waldhauser's ex-wife. And she's bitter as fuck. They're divorced. And he's like, listen, like, is there anything you could tell me about Walt that would help me in this investigation? And she's like, I don't really know. She's like, but if you want, in that room is a bunch of shit that Walt left. You can just search through it. And if you find something, take it. I don't care. So he searches this room and finds these letters. Now, the letters are written between Waldhauser and a man named Alan Ginecca. Ginecca had been in prison for some stuff. And so he's kind of a shady character. And then as they look into it, Ginecca's actually a hired hitman. And so he's like, okay, hold on now. This leads to now further investigate Ginecca. So it is found out that Ginecca had been accused of killing a marijuana dealer with an accomplice, Richard Bufkin. Now, Bufkin ends up serving time in prison while Ginecca completely walks free, because after the marijuana dealer is killed and they go to like arrest Bufkin, Ginecca busts out of town and literally like escapes. Like, they don't ever catch him. So he left him to take the whole entire crime by himself. So as you can imagine, Bufkin's fucking pissed off at Ginecca because he's like, hold the fuck on, dude. Like, we did this shit together and then you left me to take the whole entire sentence. And he did. Johnny Bonds reaches out to Bufkin, who is now out of prison on parole. So he calls Bufkin and he actually tells Bufkin, like, listen, I've talked to your lawyer. You are not in trouble. What I'm asking for is I want some information about Ginecca. I need to know who he is, what kind of a person he is. You know, there's this situation that has happened and I'm thinking he might have something to do with it. So he ends up telling him that he says, when was the last time you talked to Ginecca? And he was like, oh, not too long ago, but like, I try to stay away from him. I did my time. I'm just trying to like live my life. And he's like, well, you know, the thing is, I'm researching because a family just recently was murdered. And I'm just trying to see if there's a connection with him. And he goes, wait a minute, a family was murdered? He goes, hold on. He's like, Ginecca literally reached out and I was supposed to do that thing. I was supposed to do that with him. And he said, what he told me was that he was being paid to murder this family. He told Bufkin, you can take care of the man and the lady and I will take care of the baby. So this is what Bufkin tells Johnny Bonds. And he also says that the whole reason they were doing this is because her brother wanted to collect insurance from them. Now, Johnny Bonds goes, well, that's crazy because that's literally, he didn't tell him what happened for the murders. He just said there's a family that was murdered. And when he says when Bufkin tells Johnny Bonds, like, no, he said, I'd do this, and he goes, well, that's literally what happened. Like, what you just described is exactly what happened in real life to this family. And so he's like, so you knew nothing about this? He goes, no, I knew about it. He goes, but I didn't do it. He goes, I didn't even realize that this had actually happened. It was just something that he had reached out to me to help him. And also, I don't think Buffkin was going to help him because that motherfucker.
Yeah, I think he would have been like, fuck you, bro.
Yeah, I think he was like, whatever. And then, of course, you can't just take his word for it, right? You can't just be like, oh, okay, you didn't do it.
Right.
So they actually are talking, and he's like, I definitely didn't have anything to do with this. And of course, Johnny Bond is like, well, no, I know you didn't because you were in jail. Like when this happened, you were actually still in jail. So we know you did not have anything to do with it. But he had apparently talked to him while he was in jail. Like, hey, when you get out, I have this job for us to do. Right. Like, how fucking brazen of you, sir. You left him to take the rap for the other murder. And now you're asking him to help you again. Are you crazy? So anyway, so the conversation takes place. This conversation with Buffkin takes place about a year after the murders. So this is like a year into Johnny Bond's doing all this research and all this investigation. Finally, things start to little piece by piece come together. So it's now starting to look like Markham Duff Smith had hired Alan Janeka to kill the Wanstrath family. And this was all set up by Walter Waldhauser. Now, with this information, they're actually ready to find Janeka and have a discussion with him. So they start looking for him, and they find Janeka has moved to Georgia, right, with his girlfriend. So they're like, we're going to start with the girlfriend. It's best. We can just go ask her if she knows anything about it. So they, at this point, they have nothing other than basically hearsay, which you really can't find people guilty off of just somebody accusing somebody of doing something, right? So you still have to have some sort of proof, but now they know what they're looking for. And at the time, really the only thing they're looking for that could potentially prove who murdered was a gun. And the reason they were able to do this with the gun is I don't understand guns 100%. Something about the way the bullet went through Kevin, the little baby, the bullet was preserved. The two adults, the bullet was not preserved. You couldn't find either the bullet had, I think the bullet was supposed to I think it was kind of supposed to after it shoot it, phrase it, or I don't know, but it somehow, some way, they could not find that. But what they did do is they were looking, remember how he said, don't tear down houses? Mm-hmm. Okay. So they went back to the crime scene like a year later. Okay. And they were looking around and they're in Kevin's room. And they're looking at how he shot, and they see in the wall, there's a bullet hole. So they cut out the wall, and on the other side of the wall on the ground is the bullet. So they pick up the bullet, which is completely, fully still intact. And they were like, holy shit, this bullet, so they bring it to the labs. They do all this stuff, and they find out that this bullet and the way it was shot from a very specific gun that's actually pretty rare. So now they've got a specific gun they're looking for. Now see how they torn the house down? That would have never been happening.
Exactly.
Okay. Murders of Idaho. Anyways, and I don't mean that. I meant the police officers and stuff, not the people who were murdered. I meant the people in charge. Anyway, so they were looking specifically for this gun. No luck. I mean, they looked with Markham's house. They've looked through Waldhauser's shit. They've talked to Waldhauser's ex. Nobody knows of this gun. So now they're talking to Janeka's girlfriend. And they're telling her, we're interested in him because there was a murder and we're thinking he might have had something to do with it. We're looking for a specific gun. And this is just how things are. And she's like, well, he's not here. He's actually in Texas right now. She's like, so he's not here. So they're like, that's fine. Can we just ask you questions? And she's like, that's fine. So they're talking to her. And after they get done talking, she actually gets up, walks out of the room, comes back into the room. And she's like, is this the gun you're looking for? And she has this gun in her hand. And they're like, holy fuck, that's the gun we're looking for. And she goes, yeah, it was his gun. She goes, it's his gun. He brought it here. And so they're like, can we have this? And she's like, yes, you may. So she literally gave them the gun that he used to kill this family. They take it to the labs, make sure everything's legit. Okay. But what this does now, it gives them the murder weapon so it can help solidify that Janeka is part of the crime. But it also points to the medical examiner that he has to reevaluate this case at this point from suicide to homicide. Now, Janeka is shortly arrested for the murder of the Wanstrath family after the gun is found. And he then tells the investigators that Walt Waldhauser had helped him get the gun. And then he says that Waldhauser was also there during the murders. Okay, so now he's like, well, I'm not the only fucking person. Walt was there too. Now, this leads them to arrest Waldhauser as well. Initially, Waldhauser tries to fight it. He gets a lawyer. He refuses to talk. He's going to plead not guilty, and he's super uncooperative. But then he eventually confesses that, yes, he was part of the murder of the Wanstraths, and that he even calls Gertrude, which is the mother that supposedly committed suicide. He even says that Gertrude's suicide was a murder as well. So now he's saying, okay, hold on. You got me. Now, during this time, he actually involves another man named Paul McDonald. So this is 4 fucking people.
Jesus criminy. I'm like trying to keep up with this shit.
I know. Okay, so I'll right now we'll break it down. Markham Duff Smith is the adoptive brother who supposedly hired Janeka to kill his mother and his sister and her family. Okay? But he didn't directly hire them. His best friend, Walt Waldhauser, is the one who was the middleman between them. Okay. So he's the one who's like, I know this Janeka guy, and he's a hitman, and he
orchestrated it all.
He orchestrated it. And then Paul McDonald was the story behind this one, which is what I'm going to get into, is that Waldhauser called up this guy, and he says, I think it was Paul, actually. He calls up Paul McDonald. It's like his buddy. And he's like, hey, I got a question. Do you know somebody who's willing to kill this woman for pay? And I guess Paul, he's on the phone, and he's sitting, and it's like 2 people in a room with him, and he covers the phone. He's like, does anybody know somebody who's willing to kill an old lady for, whatever, $7,000 or whatever? And Janeka was like, I'll do it. So supposedly that's how that happened. Well, then Paul said, I got this guy. His name's Alan Janeka. He said he'll do it. And so that's that. And so Paul's then like, I'll drive him there. So Paul claims, I drove him there. Yeah, I'll take him there. Now, he also says, so that's that. I was connecting those dots. We're going to go back now to what Waldhauser is actually telling what his statement is, right? So he's now claiming, yes, I knew of the murders. Yes, I had something to do with them. And here's, but I'm not the only one. Janeka killed him. And Paul McDonald also was involved, right? So now he's like throwing people under the bus. He supposedly says that he was the one who initially got Janeka involved in the murders. And then he tells them that the motive behind the murders he told them what it was. And he also told them who was responsible for paying for it. So then he says, I had something to do with it. So did Alan Janeka. So did Paul McDonald. But none of us did it without Markham Duff Smith paying us. I helped Markham connect with these guys, but all I did was connected him. Markham is the one who...
It's like a fucking drug bust.
Right?
Like, that's the ringleader.
Actually, funny enough, there's a part in this where it is very much like that based off of sentencing. So you'll hear that. Because he was so willing to help with all this information, he gets a 30-year sentence. That is it. Now, at this point, they know for sure they've got they've got 4 people involved in the murder of technically 4 people, but one is a family that was murdered and then one is whatever. And so Paul McDonald, they go and search for Paul McDonald now because they're like, well, now we got another player in this, but this is for Gertrude's death. It's not for the family. Now, Paul McDonald is arrested, and he actually gives a 5-page confession. And he tells them, like, I'm happy that you guys are here. I'm happy to tell you. I want to get this shit off my chest. It's been bothering me for the last however many years. He made an excellent witness. He was not afraid to speak on it. He was not afraid to say what happened. He basically tells the police that he drove Janeka to Gertrude's home, where he waited in the car while Janeka killed her. He then said that Janeka did not mean to stage it to look like a suicide. So he said it's kind of weird that it came out as a suicide because it wasn't supposed to be. There is a picture. Now, I don't know. It's a drawing, but I believe it's a drawing. Like they had drawings of like the crime scene of the Wanstrath family. Well, they have a drawing of Gertrude. And according to what I can tell in the drawing, she was found laying on the couch with the pantyhose wrapped.
I would have never.
So how would you have labeled that
suicide
as
anyways?
Right. When I saw that, I was like, is that really how they found her? Because how the fuck do you find that suicide? Because what did she do? Cut herself down from the ceiling after she died? Because that's the only way she would have killed herself, right? You're trying to say that she was strangled, or like she's not going to strangle herself with
And if that's really what you thought, are you crazy? How are you going to choke yourself?
Maybe
out
it was
like
the same medical examiner.
Honestly, probably, because that guy was something special. Anyway, so he says it wasn't actually staged to look like a suicide, so that was weird that that's what it came out of. And then he says that Janeka also took Gertrude's license as proof of the kill, and he actually brought the license to Markham and was like, it's done, to collect his money, like a real hired hitman. Now, this leads the police to finally being able to link Markham to all 4 of the murders. So the police, they go to arrest him. And the actual warrant they have is just for the murder of his mother, though. And I do know why. I was going to say I don't know why. Now, before I get into that, Johnny Bond said that when they went to go arrest Markham, they showed up at his house. And he lived in this really fancy, fucking nice ass house or whatever. And he said his girlfriend opened the door. And he was like, is Markham here? And she goes, yeah, he's upstairs in the bathroom. And he was like, we're here to arrest him for the murder of his mother. And she goes, okay. So he goes upstairs and Markham's shaving. And he said it was crazy because when I walked up there, Markham turned and looked at him and was not surprised at all that the cops were at his house. And he says, Markham, I'm here to arrest you for the murder of your mother. And his little response was, can I finish shaving first? So he just had no emotion about it. He didn't give a shit. And he probably knew at some point it was coming. I think he also thought he was going to get away with it, if I'm being honest. So they arrest him. Now, at this point, at this arrest, it has been almost 2 years since the Wanstrath murders, which means it's been 7 years since the murder of his mother. Now, the murder is described by Waldhauser. So now we're back to Walt, who is his best friend who orchestrated, right? He was the middleman. Now, he says that Markham had used up all of his money that he had inherited from his mother's murder. So if you remember, he inherited about $100,000 from his mom and he had blown through that money. He also had borrowed $7,000 from his sister and that he was being pressured to pay her back. So he came up with a plan. And his plan was that he told his sister that he was going to be building a house in her area. And then he wanted to know if his sister would give input on the house that they're wanting to build. So the plan evolved to Janeka and Waldhauser going to the Wanstrath's home, and Janeka pretended to be an architect. So they open the door, they let them in, they sit down. Now, once they're in the house, Janeka now this is out of Janeka's fucking mouth. This is literally what Janeka says himself. Waldhauser's story is a little different, but I'm going to tell you first what Janeka says. So Janeka says that we walked into the house and that he walks in, John is sitting in the chair, Diana's kind of over on this side, and or maybe she might be in a chair too, because they're all going to sit down to talk about architecture, and he gets up and walks behind John and shoots him in the head. Just like that, just shoots him in the head. And then he says that next, Diana is sprayed with mace by Waldhauser, and then Waldhauser throws her on the ground and holds her to the floor as Janeka walks up, holds the gun to her head, and kills her. And then he said that Waldhauser goes into the couple's bedroom because he's looking for jewelry and stuff that he can take to pocket because he's kind of shitty. They're all shitty, but he's really my least favorite person in this whole story is Waldhauser. And you'll know why. But anyways, so he's looking for that, and he looks at Janeka and says, the kid's in the room, go take care of it. So Janeka said that he goes into the bedroom, he opens the doorway, and the light's on. So he uses his elbow to turn off the light. And he said that he's sitting at the doorway and all he has is the hallway light on and he can see the baby in the crib. And he said at that moment, all I could think of is I'm doing a job. And he said, so I looked at the little fella, I shot and shut the door. That's what he said, which is just disgusting.
Disgusting.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it took all of this evidence and all of these confessions and the indictment for the fucking medical examiner to actually change the ruling to death by homicide. He didn't change it until they had these confessions.
That's wow.
Even though they had the gun, he didn't change it until he was basically forced to change this shit because they're going to
want to fucking hurt his ego,
right? And they're going to trial for murder, and the suicide
so
is still
hopefully
there.
That guy's job is no longer
right. Hopefully, you're no longer a medical examiner. So now
I'm gonna put in my will to make sure that he is not the medical examiner.
Well, he was really old at the time, so I'm pretty sure he's probably not alive.
Probably, but still.
So now Waldhauser claims, now this is what Waldhauser claimed. He claimed, I didn't do anything other than we sat down, I opened a briefcase and sprayed both of them with mace, And then I left the room. And when I was almost to the kitchen, I heard the first gunshot. That's what he says. He's like, I had nothing to do with it. All I did was sprayed him with mace. I highly doubt it. Anyways, so again, remember, he literally only receives 30 years for the murders in exchange for his confession. So remember, he got 30 years in prison, and that's it for this. Not only this, but admitting to also fucking setting up the murder of Gertrude. But, you know, according to the detectives, they said the reason we gave him that plea deal is because, like you said, with drug busts, it was the only way we could ensure that everybody would pay for what they did.
Yep.
Which always fucking sucks.
Sucks, but then you get to knock them all down.
But then you get all of them. Now, Paul McDonald was charged with the murder of Gertrude as well. Now, he pled guilty to that murder, and he actually received 16 years for his part in this murder. So I feel like that's pretty fair because he didn't murder her. He drove to the murder scene, and he was the initial contact between Janeka and Waldhauser, but he didn't actually physically, he was an accomplice. So 16 years for being an accomplice, and he admitted to it. So I feel like that's okay. I mean, I guess that's what you do, right? Now, Alan Janeka. So Janeka claimed that he had nothing to do with the murder of Gertrude. And he said that he actually never, he said that he did not have anything to do with the murder of Gertrude. He wasn't even there. And he actually was never charged with that murder, probably because they didn't have enough evidence to really push that murder on him. Now, he did admit to shooting the Wanstrath family members, but he was actually only charged with the murder of Kevin. And that is probably because the only physical evidence they had was that one bullet that came through Kevin's head that connected him. He actually got tried twice for this crime because he was originally convicted, and his original conviction was reversed due to an error of his original indictment. So something had happened somewhere along the lines that made it not, that his whole entire trial basically was null.
Okay.
So they said, you got to retry him. So he's retried again, and he is found guilty of capital murder this time, which leads to the death sentence by lethal injection for the murder of Kevin. Now, Markham Duff Smith is charged with murdering his mother, only his mother.
That's fucking bullshit.
Here's why. And this is what they actually said. The reason he was only charged with the murder of his mother was because it was the strongest case they had. And they said, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, because if he escapes this one now, or if he gets like a super minimal sentence, now we can tack on the murder of his sister and use the fact that he's been found guilty or accused of killing his mom as well to make that a stronger case. So it's like to be honest, it's more of like it
was like in their back pocket.
Yeah, it was like, we don't want to throw all
plan
of that. Because also, if he was found not guilty, he'd never be tried for any of the murders again. So if he was found not guilty of killing his mom, then you could at least try to get him guilty for killing his sisters and her family, or his sister and his family. So I get it. I get that 100%. Now, during his trial, the prosecutors actually were supposed to use Waldhauser, his best friend, as a witness because he had written a confession statement. He literally got 30 years for confessing all this shit. Now, they end up not using him because one of the things that he was doing is he'd say all this stuff to the police officers and the detectives, and then he would go back to prison and tell all the inmates, I'm lying to those guys. Markham had nothing to do with it. I'm just trying to save my own ass. I just did it so I could get a good deal. I lied my ass off. Literally fucking up his own personal testimony, which means he's not a reliable witness. Okay. And so when they find out that he's going and telling these inmates, because these inmates are now telling Markham, like, hey, your buddy is literally lying to the cops, and then now he's coming here and telling us that he basically threw you under the bus to save his own ass. And so Markham goes to his lawyer and he's like, hey, this is what's going on. So then his lawyer goes to the prosecutors and say, just so you know, this is what's going on. So they interview these inmates, and they're like, there's like 11 inmates that are like, oh yeah, he's definitely said that he's lying. Like and so the prosecuting attorneys are like, fuck it. Like, we're not using Walt. Like, we're going to have to find a way to make this shit stick because Walt is not a reliable witness. Now, the defense, on the other hand, is like, I want every single one of you inmates to testify saying that Waldhauser has been telling you that he's lying to the police and he's putting blame on Markham.
and that Markham never really asked for his family to be killed, like every single one of you. And of course, all of these inmates are like, yeah, okay, sure. So Markham is also telling his attorney that Johnny Bonds, because when he first meets up with his attorney, he keeps saying, like, I didn't do this. Like, I would never have done this. And he's like, okay, well, tell me why you think it is that Johnny Bonds has been chasing this story or this murder for 2 years, and now he's blaming you. And he said, because he fucking hates me. And he's like, well, why does he hate you? And he's like, because he just does. He doesn't fucking like me. That's what he tells his lawyer anyways. And he's like, oh, and he said, well, they're just trying to find somebody to blame, and I'm the best person. Like, it's just this whole thing. So his lawyer actually, to be fair, defense lawyers typically do know if their clients are guilty or not, because they will tell their client. A lot of the times clients will tell their lawyer, like, yeah, I did it. And then the lawyers have to find a way to basically either get them the best sentence or try to make it not. Sorry if you hear that. I'm not stopping it. It's the pups. They're playing. So that's what he's telling his lawyer. And so his lawyer's like, okay. And his lawyer actually believed him. He was like, I looked this man in the eye over and over for months. And I just, you know what? He didn't do this. And so I needed to find a way to like get him set free. Well, with the inmates now, he's like, well, this was our best get out of jail free card, because now we've got 11 people to testify that Waldhauser's a liar. They're the last day of trial. They've gone through everything. And this last day is when they bring all the inmates in to like final stick, which is a really good, I think, move in my opinion. If you want to leave the jury like, what? Mm-hmm. You present everything, and then the final day be like, oh, by the way,
and there's this.
There's also this, right? So the trial is on its last day. And Jerry Soul Eichenhorst is actually set to testify. He is actually one of the witnesses from the jail. He's in jail. He's in jail for rape, by the way. So he's a not a great guy. But he is set to testify that he had been told that Markham did not pay for the murders and that Waldhauser had been lying, and he was all, set. However, this is not what happens. So he actually requested to speak with the detectives before he is set to testify. I'm going to guess like a couple of days before he was supposed to testify. The warden actually calls the detectives and said, you need to come down here. We have an inmate, Jerry Soul Eichenhorst, who wants to talk to you. And they're like, okay, fine, whatever. So they show up. Now, I'm sure the detectives were probably like, is he going to ask for a fucking deal to like not or whatever, which they're not entertaining this. Johnny Bonds goes, okay, so what do you want to tell? Like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I would like to let you know that I have been lying to you, and I've been lying to everybody, and I would like to tell the truth. And they're like, about what? And he's like, well, Markham Duff Smith actually offered me cash in exchange for my testimony, saying that Waldhauser was lying. And they're like, okay, well, what did he do? And he's like, well, he literally sat down and said, I want you to say this. I want you to say that. This is what I want you to do. And he's like, okay, well, you're one of 11 inmates saying this. What are we supposed to do? He goes, well, here. And he hands them a piece of paper. And this paper has a literal script of what he was supposed to say. And it literally, like, it says, like, I never received a driver's license from Janeka. I never asked for my mother to be killed. If they ask you this, you are to say this, right? So they said, can we take this script for a hot minute? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. And so they take, and by the way, he's telling them, this is what Duff Smith, this is what Markham gave me, and said, study it so that when it's your turn on the stand, you know what to say. So they're like, let me just see this for a hot minute. And they take the script from him and they fingerprinted it because they wanted to see, and Markham's fingerprints were all over the paper. So now they're like,
idiot,
holy fuck, right? So on the last day where they're sitting there testifying, they call up Jerry Soul Eichenhorst, who happens to be the last witness, which is so weird because, like, that's weird that's how it came out, right? It's just weird that's how it came out. And actually, the defense attorney did say, before I called him, I kept thinking like something's not fucking sitting right. Something feels off. And that's part of the reason why he was the last one called to the stand, because he was like, I don't know if I could trust this guy. Like, I don't know. And so he gets up on the stand and they're asking him the questions that they ask everybody else. And he actually tells them, well, no, I've been lying. Markham actually offered to pay me cash for my testimony here in court. And they're like, what? Well, now we're, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, if you want the proof, and he pulls the fucking paper out of his pocket and hands it to him. And he pulls the paper out and he said, if you want proof, this is what he wrote me that I had to say.
Damn.
And apparently in that moment, people looked right at Markham, and Markham was like pale fucking white. And immediately his face just goes completely cold. Like you can tell, oh fuck, I recognize that piece of paper. So this actually shook the defense. The defense took the paper, looked at it, and called for like a recess because he was like, what the fuck? Well, the defense attorney, because he was also in the documentary, the defense attorney said, I was so embarrassed. I was angry because he had lied to me this whole fucking time. And I didn't even want anything to do with him at this point.
Like, at least tell me the truth, and then we can
tell
work
me the
from
truth.
there.
Right. And he was like, I had this guy pegged as being wrongfully accused, and now I've got this guy who I'm like, holy shit, Markham, are you fucking kidding me? So he's like, I had to like figure out what to do from this point, because he's like, I wanted nothing to do with him. Like, I didn't even know what to do, and here's my client that I wanted nothing to do with. So Markham Duff is then sentenced. He's found guilty. And he is sentenced to death by lethal injection as well. Now, when Eichenhorst was asked why he did it, they said, like, they were saying things like, you're a fucking snitch now. Like, do you understand the ramifications you're going to get? You're a fucking snitch. Like, is it not the worst thing in the world?
Literally, snitches get stitches.
Right. And he's like,
or dead.
And actually, one of the it was the prosecuting attorney was talking to him, and he said, how are we supposed to help you with this? Like, you're a snitch now. Like, is it not the worst thing in the world to be a snitch in prison? So he tells him, no, there's only one thing worse than being a snitch. And that's somebody who kills a baby.
I was just going to say a child murderer.
Yep. And so I'm kind of like, he's a rapist, so he's a piece of shit. But God damn, if that isn't true. Well, and if that isn't true, if people really want to understand, that's literally the mentality of prison. That is why people who are child murderers and pedophiles, unfortunately, are separated. They are separated because people, no matter how bad of a criminal you are, y'all have one thing in common. You hate people who kill or are not kill, people who hurt children. You hate them enough that you'll kill them, right? And so to me, I was like, I don't like you for what you did because you're a rapist, but fucking thank you for telling the truth in a scenario that needed the truth be told. And it kind of gives me chills because it's like, you actually are a snitch for the rest of your life. However, most people in jail will agree that you snitched for the right reason because you were going after a child murderer. Here are some updates on this case. So Waldhauser, and here's why I don't fucking like him. So Walt Waldhauser was actually released on good behavior after only serving 9 years.
Of course.
9? When are we going to learn in our fucking justice system that good behavior isn't a thing? Especially not even serving half your sentence, bro. You served 9 out of 30 years. Now, when he gets out of prison, he changes his name to Michael Lee Davis, and 10 years later, he gets caught in a money laundering scheme, and he is actually sentenced to 60 years in jail. Now, he actually becomes eligible for parole 7 years later for good behavior. And thankfully, his parole was fucking denied.
Okay, I was like, come on.
He was eligible again for parole in 2011. But here's where it gets good. Remember Johnny Bonds? Mm-hmm. Johnny Bonds is not done with this because he's pissed off that Waldhauser is like the worst of the worst because he orchestrated this shit and got away with it, basically. Johnny Bonds was like, no. Because he didn't even know, he had actually found out that he, like, on his first eligible parole, when he got denied, is when it came to his attention that Waldhauser had been put back in prison for something. And he was like, it didn't fucking surprise me. And he's like, well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not letting this guy get out. So he goes to his parole hearings. Every fucking time he gets a chance at parole, Johnny Bonds continues to fight for Waldhauser to stay in jail. He will bring up the murders, all of them. He brings pictures. He brings people who are still currently alive that were involved to all testify as to why he should never get out of jail. Now, he was eligible for parole again in 2011, and he was denied parole at that time. And as my knowledge, he is still currently in prison. And if he does not get paroled within this next whatever, like I think he can only be due parole so many times.
Yeah, you only have so many number of chances that you have at being up for parole and getting it granted or not. Yes. And then eventually once those chances run out, you just have to finish out your sentence.
So if he does not get paroled, his release date will be 2059. So he'll be dead. He'll die, which is what my hope is. Now, Johnny Bonds said, I will never give up. Every time he comes up for parole, I will be there. My information will be there. My investigation will be there. My witnesses, my people who are affected by this will be there. They will be there because we need to show them that no, not only did he, because what his money laundering scheme was, he actually schemed elderly people out of millions of dollars. So not only did he do something bad to these people, but look what he did prior to this. He fucking orchestrated 4 murders, like 4 murders, and also literally lied and tried to get out of it. He got a 30-year sentence. He got out of prison early, and literally within 10 years, he was back in prison because he's that much of a shitty person. Johnny Bonds actually says that Walt Waldhauser has the emotions of a shark. He has none. He is a true sociopath. And he says that the only human emotion he has is greed. And he's like, and I will literally live the rest of my life making sure that he never gets out of jail. And again, Johnny Bonds is a retired detective. And he is still doing that. Now, he is the only living suspect left, actually. So Walt Waldhauser is the only one that's still alive. Now, I am unsure at this moment if he is currently in prison because I wasn't able to actually find him in the prison systems. Now, that is not to say he didn't get put into a different prison. And the other thing is he might have changed his name again. He changed his name to Michael Lee Davis. He could have gotten out. He could not have. He could not be in the prison systems that are like if he's in a private sector prison, I won't be able to access their information. I can only access government funded prisons. So as it sits right now, though, the prison that he used to be in, he is not in their records anymore. So I don't know if he's in prison, out of prison. I don't know. Now, Paul McDonald, to the best of my knowledge, served his sentence and at some point died, but there was literally nothing on what happened to Paul McDonald. Markham Duff Smith was executed on June 29th, 1993. And he was executed by lethal injection. And his final statement was, I am the sinner of all sinners. I was responsible for the 75 and 79 cases. First of all, let me pause. So he admitted literally in his final statement to the murders, which he had never done before. So he finally did. And he was actually brought into Alan Janeka's second trial because Janeka got tried, found guilty, and then they had to retry him in between those. Markham Duff Smith got tried and found guilty. So they brought him in to testify against Alan Janeka, and still in that one was like, I had nothing to do with it. So the fact that he admitted to it was great because he had never admitted to it before. Start over. I am the sinner of all sinners. I was responsible for the 75 and 79 cases. My trial was not just. It was not fair. They lied against me. I love all of those on death row, and I will always hold them in my hands. Those who stood by me, I will always love you. Jim and Judy Peterson and Chaplain Lopez, I thank you for staying by my side. So the thing that bothers me about this statement is he's not the only one that does this, but every time I fucking hear somebody in their final statement say some shit about not being fair, like bitch, it wasn't fair that you took people's lives.
Exactly.
Why does it need to be fair? Like when you say things like, I don't deserve to die. Well, neither did the people that you fucking killed. So you, sir, your whole entire, it's not fair. Dude, you took away a 14-month-old baby's life for fucking money. That was your nephew. Talk about fair. So that's him. Then Alan Janeka was also put to death. I was very, very pleased with the ending of this because I was like, thank God the 2 people that got the death penalty actually fucking died on July 24th of 2003. So he lived a lot longer. Now, he was also executed by lethal injection, and his final statement was, "For many years, I have done things my way, which has caused a lot of pain to me, my family, and many others. Today, I've come to realize that for peace and happiness, one has to do things God's way." And then he was put to death. I was happy with the results of what happened, but it's just one of those things where it's like, at least, so Janeka actually, before he was put to death, he actually did like a whole ass interview, and he went into detail about things that happened, and he went into detail about what it was like, and he was absolutely like, yes, I killed them. Like, that, there is no, I mean, never once did he say he didn't do it. So he took that shit on the chin and went, did his thing. And even his final last statement wasn't like, this isn't fair. Like, he was like, yep, I fucking did this. Like, here, this is my punishment. So anyways, the reason I wanted to do this one is because it's a fucking clusterfuck of people, but it was like, how like they're all interlinked with each other.
All I gotta say is I knew it wasn't the fucking suicide with the pantyhose.
I know.
I'm just throwing
when
that
I
out
said
there.
that, you literally rolled your eyes. You're like, what the fuck?
I almost looked at you and said, well, obviously she got murdered.
I know. And the fact that we, as like not medical examiners, were able to like go, that's not possible. I mean,
I think there should be a police unit that's crime junkies. I bet you we'd solve a lot of fucking cases.
Well, there's that one case that I don't know if, oh man, I don't think you've ever watched it. Dad and I watched it on Netflix, and it was about, it's a guy in Canada who killed cats
with
on
the cats?
YouTube.
I watched it with you
Okay,
guys.
so that guy, the only reason he got caught was because of the fucking
crime junkie people.
Yes, the true crime people who focused in on things that the fucking police don't, either they don't care, maybe there's just too many.
Well, but there's also formalities when it comes to police work, right?
True.
Like for us people that are just citizens, like we don't have to follow your jurisdiction bullshit type stuff.
That's true. That's
so
true.
like, and we can cut corners. We can do all the, like, yeah, y'all got information that we can't do, like DNA testing, all that shit. But I know that there's probably certain things that they can and can't cross.
But like, for instance,
which I think is dumb.
But for instance, really, on that specific case, you're telling me that it took for the true crime lovers to pause his video because they said they couldn't figure out where he was from, to pause his video and look at the outlets on his wall to see that his outlets were not U.S. outlets, to know he wasn't in the United States. How is that not what the cops are like? Why are they not doing that? And so it's like, it's you know what it is? It's a fresh set of eyes, right? If you're a detective and you've been doing this for years, what do? You do what you always do. And sometimes what you always do is not gonna work.
Well, and you don't link cases as in like, oh, you know, this person could have killed so and so and so and so, but I'm sure you're like, oh, I've seen something like this before. This is how it went. This is how we do it. So you kind of go through that routine.
You use your own knowledge, and it's also like, which you're experienced in that way, but also I think you run into an issue where you go, kind of desensitized to it. You know, you might be a little desensitized to it of looking as hard as you should have, because you're like, okay, well, I already know the outcome of this one.
Right.
So anyways, that was the story of the Wanstrath murders, which is a very sad story. But like I said, I loved the documentary. And if you want to know the documentary, if anybody is looking into watching a really, really awesome documentaries, it's on Hulu, and it's called Texas True Crime. And it's literally all Texas. And there's like 3 episodes per season. There's 4 seasons. But they're all, I think I've watched like 4 of them so far, and they are all very well done. And like I said, with this particular one, you literally get the words right out of Johnny Bond's mouth, which also, what a fucking name for a detective. Tell me Johnny Bonds isn't best detective name. I'm like, shit, man, you were made for this. But yeah, I would highly, highly recommend, if you have Hulu and you want to watch that, Texas True Crime is really cool. My brother actually sent it to me. I was like, hey, since you're into true crime, check this out. And I was very much so. Like I said, I've watched 4 episodes, and some of them are serial killers, and then some of them are true crime, which I am going to do a couple more probably off of that specific set of episodes, because I really like how they do their information. It doesn't seem very biased, if I'm being honest. Sometimes those documentaries can be very biased towards one side or the other. And in this one, they were very just like factual. So I genuinely appreciate it. But anyways, I don't have anything else to say other than make sure you're following us on all of our socials. Make sure that whatever platform you're listening to us on, that you have that subscribe button clicked so that when we post new episodes every Tuesday, you won't have to go search for us because it'll pop up on your phone or wherever you're listening to us at. Other than that, I'm going to say, catch you on the flip side, bitches.
Bye, bitches.